today I'm talking to Coach Cathryn. Cathryn, welcome to the show. You are a career and executive coach, and gosh, we've got a lot to talk about today because we've been having a few preliminary chats, and I'm going to get straight into the conversation. Cathryn, can you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are currently?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was a very windy, squiggly road for me because I think, like a lot of people, when I left school, I had no idea what I was meant to be, what my purpose was. I knew I had a purpose. I knew there was a mission. And I'd always been told I was born to teach. But I had been at school for 12 years and realized that the life of a teacher was not the life that I wanted. I wanted to be able to make a difference. And I suppose in a way, it had to be done in my own way rather than in this very prescriptive, administrative, sort of, not able to think out of the box kind of way. And I don't want to suggest that all teachers approach teaching in that way, but it was certainly my experience. There were probably two teachers, like for all of us, there'll be two or three teachers that really stand out as being the ones who made a difference in our lives. And through happenstance, really, which really was a friend of my mum's who lived across the road from us said, "We're looking for people at British Airways and you'd be perfect." And I thought, oh, well, I'll go for the interview and get the experience. And I got the job and never, ever looked back. And I found that I just flourished in the corporate world. This was back in the mid 80s. So we were just going on to computerized systems. And I found that I had a natural aptitude for learning and for process and efficiency, balanced with a desire to make the world a better place through interactions with people. And that was whether it was colleagues in the office or customers, passengers who were flying. So that's where I started off. But it was only probably around about 20 years ago, so I was 20 years into my career, that I realized that I needed to do something. I needed to make a conscious effort to work out what it was I was meant to do. So by then I'd worked for corporates for 15 years. I'd worked in startups and early stage businesses and in franchising for 5 years. And I knew there was something that I was meant to be doing, but it was really, really difficult to try and find out what that was meant to be, because this isn't something that you can go and read a book. There isn't some book somewhere where I can look at my name and go, Cathryn O'Donnelly was meant to be a this, this, and this, and to use her skills in this way. I felt that I didn't really have any skills apart from these soft skills, which didn't seem to, in my book anyway, have much value. It wasn't the same as being an engineer or a doctor or a scientist or something that I saw as being, one of the sort of more serious professions. So I, through a process of really working out step by step who I was, what I wanted to be, what my mission and purpose was, did I get to design a career that would really, really work for me.
That's absolutely phenomenal, Cathryn, because you and I are aligned in what we're doing, because you are absolutely focused on making a difference and what is my mission and my message. And it sings to my heart because I feel the same, having been through a similar journey of who am I, what have I got to offer, and now what do I do with it? And you've actually made that your career as a coach, a mentor, and somebody who's cheerleading people to follow the journey really that you've been on in terms of exploration. Cathryn, we live in a very busy world and there's a lot of noise out there. And you and I have talked about, you do a podcast, we chop it up, we put it out there and we see what happens. It doesn't feel very engineering process orientated. It feels a bit like a dark art. Tell me how you navigate that feeling, because I know that you're a process person, but you understand the importance of internal identity, intuition, and the bits on the inside, not the process on the outside. How does it feel when I ask you that question? And could you talk a bit more about that?
Yes, I am intuitive and I am creative and I love to be able to harness that. What I've realized though is that without a structure in place. And sometimes I can invent or create that structure. Sometimes that just doesn't work, and I need to revert to tried and tested methods. And you can probably see my sort of library at the back. That's something that I've collected over the past 40 years, trying to figure out what's, what how do we know what is life, what is the meaning of life, what is our purpose, how is it that we are here, and I suppose coming up with a philosophy. This is what it was for me, coming up with a philosophy that actually applies to every single one of us as human beings, that thing that we all have in common, and really boiling it down to the fact that we have one life. We've
Yes.
got one life, and there is nobody apart from us. It is such, it's like a double-edged sword. Both a gift and it is a curse that nobody can look into our hearts and our souls and say, this is it, this is your destiny. But it is really within us. And I remember when I did my coaching training, the trainer saying that imagine every client is like an acorn, because that acorn knows how to become a mighty oak. It's all programmed into it, and that every client has that inside themselves as well. But throughout our lives, and I'll say our because the conversations we've had, and every client I've worked with, and everybody I come across, really, it is it's somehow we lose our way. We are influenced by other people, and we're talking about imposter syndrome today. We come to doubt ourselves, and we come to doubt our path, and because we have to stand up for ourselves when we are advocating for ourselves, it can really be a challenge to go, you know what, I want to do something different, or I want to change. And we will have well-meaning family and friends who we talk to, who know us very well, will, through for whatever reason, usually it's for a sense of wanting to give us some security, don't want us to make big changes. So if you have spent all these years qualifying to be a lawyer or to be a doctor or to be whatever you have studied for, the fact that you might have outgrown that or even made a mistake can be really hard for other people to let us go from that identity that they, how they have seen us, how they have known us. And when I'm in career coaching conversations, there are three little words that I always listen out for, because when they come up, I know we've really hit on something, and they're very telling. Those words are, it sounds silly. And then I wait for what's next, because that silly thing is the thing that they are afraid to say. They're afraid for the world to know, or at least one person. It's sort of, I'm going to be the first person maybe who's heard the fact that what they would really love to do is a combination of this and that, or they would like to retrain and do something. It's like, but can I? And looking for that permission to explore something different, to maybe reinvent themselves. And it is through it is such a privileged role to be in, to help people, to be that sounding board and help them unlock that thing that they are afraid to say. I met somebody recently who I have a camper van, and I was taking my camper van for a service, and there was somebody else waiting for her vehicle, dressed in riding gear, and I said, "Oh, you have a horse?" Natural conversation opener when you see someone in joggers and riding boots. And she said, "Yes, she's a horse podiatrist." And they've had these silicone horseshoes that have been made, and she helps horse owners. And she says, "Oh, but that's not my main job. I'm also senior cabin crew for Virgin." And I just said, I need to interview you. Because people need to know. People need to know that actually you can be and do anything. And it's not that if you are this, you then can't be that. So I will often have conversations with people where they'll say, I really want to do this, but I can't because I'm not going to be earning enough, or because I don't have the qualifications, or it sounds like they're mutually exclusive. And mine is always, okay, how do we do both? How can we bring both of those things in, and then have a look at how maybe other people have done it, or creative ways that can happen.
That is a brilliant, brilliant story, and that there's so much in just that short space of time. We always know this is going to be a good episode when within the first 5 minutes we're getting to the absolute heart of the conversation. And you've just mentioned a number of things there. The acorn analogy, you have
Mm,
everything you need. You already have
yes.
everything. We just need to activate it. And of course, you also mentioned at the beginning there the problem with people's responses when we change. From an
Mm,
evolutionary psychology perspective, it's very, very unsettling for the people around us when we begin to change the way we are. And I think
mm,
that blocks people very often because it sounds like the world on the outside is saying, don't do it, don't do it. Catherine, don't make a change. What they're actually saying is, oh my goodness, any change can be threatening to the status quo. Tribal beings,
yeah.
prey animals. I'm not sure how this is going to go. And I think people often hear that as a discouragement. And it's not, it's just simply human nature.
It really is. And I work with people who are very early on in their careers, right the way through to people in their 50s, 60s, 70s even, who are thinking about legacy and, the difference that they would like to make to the world. And this isn't something that is exclusively for people who are nearing retirement and going, what's my swan song going to be? We're finding more and more with the younger generation that the work they do needs to be tied to something that is really important in the world. That what is the point of doing something that is going to not make the world a better place? And they really are digging in their heels. And I find that because I do in company consultancy work too, as you do, that listening to those voices can be really important for I said me in the older generation, to realize that actually that change can come from anywhere. It can come from from youngsters. It can come from within. It can also come from people who are at the end or already in retirement, who are saying, if I had my time again, this is what I would be doing. And one of the exercises that I do is to help people imagine themselves maybe 20 years from now and look back to this very moment. So people who are watching now, think back to this moment and imagine what your regrets would be, the things that you haven't done yet, the things that you are still meant to be doing. And those can give us a really good indication of how we are meant to use our skills and talents, and what wasted time would look like, and maybe where we need to step outside that comfort zone a little bit and into that stretch zone, and start to try different things, explore different things outside of things that you might have done in the past.
I think you're one of the first people I've ever spoken to, Catherine, who's just managed to tie two desires from Gen Z through to those who are thinking about exiting the workplace at the other end. We actually all now feel the same shared desire for purpose. And
Yes.
I keep hearing people saying, oh, it's so different. I've got this situation in the office where I've got young people, especially if they're returning to work after COVID, etc. There's a lot of moaning and groaning about the differences. But you've just articulated the fact that we now have this shared purpose at all ages throughout those generations that actually could unite us potentially in the corporate space to really improve our work-life balance and our motivation, and also that piece on retention that we know is causing a huge problem corporately at the moment. ESG, so people are beginning to say, this is how we're going to really make a difference. Are you seeing anything come up around that in the corporate space, or is it still feeling like this is a new conversation?
Um, it's not a new conversation. I think there is far more emphasis on it now because of the reality of the evidence that we are seeing. So we've always lived in a changing world, but some of the changes that we are seeing right now, this decade, are they're taking us in a direction that we maybe hoped we wouldn't be going, and it's going faster than we would have
Mm.
expected. So I think the movements out there, we know things like the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, any movement that an ESG as being the corporate the corporate way of approaching this it is a reality, and I'm really excited. You know, a lot of coaching clients, when they are looking for meaning and purpose, they are looking at the problems that need to be solved in the world and what their
Yes.
place is in doing that. And I find that really exciting. And I think for a lot of people, there's this emphasis on, well, it's got to be about green technology and you've got to be technical people to do that. And that's not the case. We can take whatever skills and experience and passions we have and find roles, or even my favorite, create roles that are in the right place at the right time. So even if you are playing a supporting role in doing that, knowing that you're working for a company that is there for good and is helping, you know, that's triple bottom line with it's not just about profit, it's about people and planet as well. And companies that are, through the work that they're doing, making the world a better place or paving the way for positive change, that is, you know, it's a huge and growing sector. So for people who do have that motivation, there is an ever expanding world that's, you know, for them to explore.
You're so encouraging in the way you talk about that desire, because those are the sort of soapbox moments where I think people say to you, am I allowed to be passionate about this? Is this
Mm,
okay? There's a real vulnerability in people saying, my heart is bleeding for this. Like my heart is breaking in this place. And how do I make that part of my world? And I mentioned to you that I was on a training course last week with a large number of people coming out of the NHS, and the pain that they've experienced not being able to make a difference. They're now extremely burnt out and traumatized, with a small
yes.
t. This is really unpleasant for people, and your job, Cathryn, is to step into that as a cheerleader alongside and say, come on, you've got all of this inside of you, let's activate it. um this is a really difficult conversation because I want to talk about imposter syndrome, but there's almost other things that are more exciting. Can I ask you about what we've called, or you call, risk-free plan B? Because that's that sort of
Mm,
conversation that these people, whether they're coming out of the NHS, the legal
yes.
system, perhaps we talked about professors or teaching professionals. What does that look like if you say, let's explore risk-free plan B?
Yes. So one of the things that keeps us stuck where we are is that fear of the unknown. So what is going on outside, and what keeps, you know, what we put up with. You mentioned those professions. There are lots more professions as well, but where people are putting up with what has become a toxic work culture. It hasn't set out to be, that way, but with all of the pressures, with reducing budgets and short supplies of staff, those environments have become quite toxic. There are leaders who are still using a very outdated leadership style, so micromanagement, unrealistic demands, and almost putting their hands up and saying, look, I can't do anything. We just have to continue fighting on, and not realizing that we're not machines. We're human beings and we break. And when we are so purpose driven and we're in roles where we know we're helping people, it's almost like we don't have permission to stop. And you and I spoke about this, sometimes having to stop. And I know I'm kind of moving a little bit away from the question, but I will come back to it. That I went through a personal situation last year where I didn't have a choice but to stop for 6 months, which was terrifying because I live on my own, I have my own business, and to just have to stop because there was no alternative for me, was pretty terrifying. But it was in that stopping that I found my way forward. And there is a lovely poem which I'll send you a reference to for people to look up, called Unstoppable. And it says something like, they thought that she was unstoppable, but she stopped, and it was there that she found her power. And that poem really helped me through, because I knew that by stilling the voices, by stilling the world around me and going within, I could find my way forward. And yes, suddenly one day there it was, all those pieces came together, and it was, we can do this again. We being me and all my pieces, we can really do this, and we can get out in the world and we can shine again. But I think it is hard to stop. So I think, yes, we've got the toxic work cultures keep us trapped. Our our sense of, and this is where imposter syndrome does come in. Who else would want me? All I've done is this.
Yeah.
And I would say that no matter where you are and what you've done, you have a wealth of transferable skills that can be used in many, many different ways. And so putting up with where you are at the moment, I think there is a benefit to that, in that we can look at what a plan B would look like. So you don't have to do something that I've done quite a few times in the past, which is just take a leap of faith and resign from my job and go and start something new. Yes, I've done that, and in most cases that has worked well. But I'm quite open to taking risks, because there's that degree of, I've got one life and I want to make the most of it, and I want to explore. But this risk-free plan B is a program that I've developed to help people who are in a position where it's not intolerable. They've made, some people have put up with those conditions for 20, 30 years, and sometimes it's 2 years, and you're thinking, I've just made the wrong decision here and I've got to get out, but what will that look like on my CV? So the risk-free plan B is about working through a process while you are in the job that you're in. And it's evaluating your strengths, evaluating your passions and your interests, and especially evaluating your skills and how those skills could map into different roles outside. And when you come to the end of that program, it's a mini course. When you come to the end of that, you will have a really, really clear understanding of what your options are. And I love working with clients through that process, because the light bulb moments that come up where they go, if only I had done this 5 years ago, or last week, or 10 years ago, I wouldn't have continued to stick with something that wasn't working, or jump from one thing to another, not knowing where I'm meant to be. And it's something I don't know why we're not taught to do this. We're not taught the value of that introspection, and that we have the key to everything we need to know within us. And there are lots of books around this. The one that comes to mind as I'm saying this is The Alchemist, where you're sitting on your trunk of treasures and you just don't know it.
No.
And working with a career coach, there's me, or any career coach, or any coach, life coaching, holistic coaches can help you explore that inner part of yourself. It's not about them giving you an answer. It's about them holding up a mirror and asking those questions and drawing it out of you, till you see in front of your very eyes those words written down, or those options written down, and go, oh my God, this is actually quite exciting. And the program goes on from there. If you might get to the end of that process and think, you know what, I'm going to stay where I am for now, and there are things that I can do to improve my situation. So one of the exercises involves working out, for each role that you've had, what you love, what you like, what you dislike, and what you hate about every role that you've had. And people will go through that, and a pattern will emerge. And I've had a client recently, so it's quite fresh in my mind, who said, I had no idea how much power I was giving away by being so passive. And I think sometimes, especially for women, but not solely for women, across the spectrum, really, we just don't have that confidence.
I work with a lot of men, and like you say, women are often, it's a bit of lack of confidence. But what I see happen with men is they actually, they just stop feeling it. So they go into this grind where they're just grinding through. And when you say, as we do in sophrology, how do you feel? They
Yeah.
get a sort of blank look on their face and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, how do you actually feel? Fine. Well, fine is not an emotion. It's not a
Yes.
feeling. It's just a survival state.
Yeah.
And I think the similarity with the work that you do, and in fact, you've just described almost the sophrology process. Pause, be still, listen for that
Mm.
small voice of calm. Notice your power, notice your people, notice your purpose, and then you move to planning. We
Yeah.
don't go from, oh my goodness, this is terrible, tomorrow I'll have a different plan. You know as well as I do, it doesn't work like that. that internal reflection, that digging down into
Mm,
the gifts and talents. And you've just described a sophrology exercise. I mean, sophrology's been around since the 1950s. The
yes.
exercise, which we know as the treasure chest, is a guided visualization where we actually go and do that, going inside and looking for, oh, there's the thing I really love. Now,
Yeah.
how do we deploy that? Not the external world says, I've been in this role for 30 years and I must continue and I'm just going to grind through. And I've watched the fact that you have the power, Cathryn, to unlock that in people. And that's very special. And that's what's exciting about sharing these conversations.
Yes, and I'd add to that because I think there's what's in the treasure chest, but then there are also those internal factors where we're holding ourselves back. And that can be to do with, low self-esteem. It can be perfectionism. It can be comparison. I mean, comparing ourselves to others. And we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, about
Mm.
social media and about how even as, business owners ourselves, how we see other people doing it. So they are, further down the line than us, or they have some kind of expertise that we compare ourselves to. And it can be very easy. We see it with a lot with the younger generation. That comparison can be hugely demotivating and devaluing. And through, career coaching isn't done in isolation, the same way as the work you do isn't done in isolation. It's about looking at the situation and the circumstances that we're in. It's looking at the context of our life and what meaning our life has. And it's about being able to step back from all of those things and go, okay, let's listen to me, to who I am and what that value is, and understand these internal factors. And that's both sort of psychological and sort of personal influences that are within us that tell us that we can't do it, that are trying to keep us safe. And that is it's very primitive, isn't it? And you'll know a lot more about that than I do. But that sort of primitive fear that we have, and sometimes we can't even put our finger on that fear. But what's working with a coach, with in general, can do is really help you explore who you are, what your mission and purpose is, what is holding you back. And once we know, so that is one of the modules that we work through, is what those limiting beliefs are. What are the things that we tell ourselves that mean that we're not actually going to do it? And I'd say
Yes.
for anybody listening to this who either hasn't worked with a coach or hasn't explored this with a coach, take this as the sign. If this is really resonating with you, take this as the sign that the first step can be to just have a chat. Just say, this is where I am, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, and start to explore that. Because there's one little word that I think holds so many of us back, and I've had to work through this myself over the years, and sort of, I suppose, dig deeper and unfold more and more, and that is shame. That there is this sense, or can be this sense of shame, that I didn't achieve what I didn't go to university, or I didn't, wasn't brought up in a in a rich family. I didn't have all of these advantages that I imagine that other people have. And that sense of shame, Brene Brown, she's got a lovely way of talking about shame. And she says, if you imagine putting a dollop of shame in a petri dish and you cover that with judgment and silence and secrecy, then it's a perfect environment for that to continue to grow and for that to continue to hold us back. But if, on the other hand, you put it in a petri dish and you put lots of empathy into it and you expose it to the light and you become more comfortable talking about your backgrounds or mistakes that you've made, or limiting beliefs that you've had, and we can get those things out in the open, oh boy, is that liberating. It is so liberating. I remember having a conversation with my daughters not that long ago. So I had this sort of period last year where it was like, oh, where am I? Who am I? What am I doing? And I had that period of stopping. And I had a bit of therapy then, and there's a support group that I went to that has been hugely helpful. And but I thought, I need to talk to my daughters. I have a son as well, but this was a conversation with my daughters to say, I've realised some of those decisions that I made when, when they were growing up, and some of the things that I did, they didn't work out, and and I'm sorry, and I recognize, I see, also I see the error of my ways, and they're sitting there nodding solemnly. I mean, they're in their 30s, so these aren't little girls. And I said, so I could just see that, sitting nodding, and I said, but aren't you upset? Aren't you surprised? And they said, no, Mum, we've grown up with you. We know who you are. You're the one who is realizing and suddenly looking at this through different eyes, and we love you anyway. And it's like, oh, okay. So we go through these stages, and shame can hold us back. If I had held on to some of those things, those mistakes that I've made, or things that I did that didn't work out, that had an impact on other people's lives, I wouldn't be able to move forward, because it can really keep us stuck in our tracks. And I know that people, as a coach, people tell you things that they've never told anybody. And they will say that sometimes within 5 minutes of meeting, it will be, look, I've never told anybody this, but I trust you. This is the thing. What can we do with, what can you tell me? And we can kind of, I suppose, coming from a place of empathy, and coming from a place of, we are all perfectly human. We always say, we're not perfect, but we are perfectly human, and we are a combination of strengths and weaknesses, and we've all done some really good things in our lives, and some things that when we look back, we think, who was she?
And I think that experience, Cathryn, is what makes you who you are in the work that you do. And anybody that's been on the podcast with me, it's because they have a human approach. And that human approach is the fact that I've walked this path and experienced this shame, pain, etc. And that then gives me the authenticity and the vulnerability to be able to coach and support people through the same journey. But when we're trying to reveal that, it's not the sort of thing, you can't suddenly post on Instagram, oh, I had such a terrible year last year, come and work with me because I know how you feel. This vulnerability these conversations create, it makes me squirm, and I think, oh gosh, the podcast conversation, I feel like, is a great way to unpack some of this. And like you say, you've walked a very winding, complicated path with light bits and dark bits, but you have learnt, like I have, when we get that light out and we shine it onto the shame, and I have a huge recurring issue with fear of failure, especially stepping into this space, nobody knows what sophrology is. I'm creating something that's, like you say, it's like a gig economy bespoke, people are like, you do what? Well, and I use the Whoop track, we're using health data and we're doing this, but we're changing behavior and physical, mental, and people are like, sorry. But it has to be part of who I am. And this is what I believe works. And you are not just a career coach. I mean, it's just a bit of a nonsensy title, really, because what you're doing is activating people's inner sense of self, intuition, desires, gifts, and talents, and moving them into a place where they can actually flourish.
Yes.
How on earth do you put a title on that?
Exactly. And we do need to give ourselves titles in a way, don't we, to kind of be seen as or to be recognized as something.
Yes.
And I know, one of the roles I've had in the past is HR director, and I would never describe myself as a typical HR director, because it is all about people and purpose and passion, and matching the needs of a business with the individuals who are within that business, and making sure that everybody is really equipped to bring the best of themselves. So yes, it's a bit of a title that puts me in a box, and it's probably just it's the closest fitting. But it's what I recognise, and where I saw my role in in HR as a director of people's roles, is that the work that we do is a significant part of our life.
Yes.
And when somebody is unhappy at work, the knock-on effect, and this is regardless of gender, when we are unhappy at work, it feeds into every aspect of our lives. So, whether we live on our own, or we have a partner, we have children, families, extended families, when we can't give of ourselves because work is taking too much away from us, we owe it, even if we can't see that we need to do that for ourselves, we need to think about the people who are around us. And I've often I use this in a gentle way, but it's, is this example that you are giving of you working in this way, this crazy chaotic way, is this a good example for your children? Is this something that you want them to see? And that can stop us in our tracks and go, you know what? Actually, I'm not being a good role model. Who would I need to be, or how would I like to be, or what needs to change for me to be able to go, whoa, okay, let's just stop. And that's where working with a coach comes in, because yes, sometimes we do need to stop. And I've done that, but we can also keep going. We can maybe just turn the dial down a little bit on some of the things that are taking all of our energy and create some space. I mean, I've had people who will take 2 days paid holiday from work, or unpaid holiday from work, to work through a course with me, to just give themselves the headspace to think about what is going on in their lives. So we sort of unpack that. We have a look at where they could potentially be. And then, as you do, it's about that process of working through from where they are, step by step, because it doesn't happen overnight. There
No.
can be some huge light bulb moments, and those are incredible. And it's always interesting. Sometimes I think there's a light bulb moment where I think I've just heard a client say something completely different to what they would have said before. And they don't necessarily see that as a light bulb moment, but there'll be something that they go, oh my God, I'd never ever thought that. And that is the thing that makes the difference. And I think that process of going from where you are now with what you have to where you want to get to takes as long as you want that to be. So I had a client a few years ago, or many years ago, who said, I've got this 5-year plan. She needed to get out of a situation she was in, which was very, very complicated. It was a relationship, it was businesses, it was properties in different countries. And she said, I know I could probably wrap this up in a year. She said, but I need this to take 5 years. I need to give myself this breathing space to do it. And she said, I need a coach who will be my sounding board and accept that, yes, I could do it faster, but I need to do it my way. And we worked together, and it was an absolute, I suppose it was a celebration every time we met and got together, which was, I think, quarterly to start off with, once she'd set off on her plan. And she redesigned her life step by step. For others, it's something, this has to happen. Maybe they're facing redundancy, or there's been a big life change, and they need to start making some of those positive changes within the next 4 weeks or the next 6 weeks, and we can really ramp that up. And what I will do there is have a look at what are the elements of the program. And it's not always just working with me, because it might be a client who could work really well with you, or with another coach, or even with a counsellor on some of the other areas. And then we sort of press pause on the career piece, and then we come back to that once they've worked on, it might be an underlying issue, or it might be some training that they would like to have, or some insight into how they work. And then we go, right, let's pick up again and have a look at what your options are, and how do you, I sort of touched on this very early on in the conversation, but how do you create a job that is going to be perfect for you? And I've become an absolute master at helping people, number one, identify what it is that they would love to do next, and then to go out and talk to the world about what that thing is, and land jobs. I mean, I've seen jobs created for, this is, it's a senior level, C-level roles with 6-figure salaries that weren't even budgeted for, that were created because the CEO that they've spoken to, just having a coffee, not even an interview, is going, I had no idea that somebody out there, existed who had these skill sets, and that's exactly what our business needs. And so I love making that happen. I love, we all know that route of finding a job through LinkedIn, or, in the olden days, it was looking through the paper at situations vacant and applying for jobs through the newspapers. But it's going back to probably, I don't know, our grandparents' age, where they'd be saying, there's a job going at the down at the mill or the newsagent or whatever, and things would happen through word of mouth. And I try and harness that as much as possible when we are looking for what we want to do next. We're looking for that next role. It's about tapping into who do we know who knows how good we are at
Yeah.
that thing.
That power of community and connection. I think people get lost in the world of LinkedIn, for example, and they forget to actually be direct about going to people and asking for what it is they want. And
Yes.
I often say to people, what is it you want? And they can go into what they don't want. Well, I
Yes.
don't want to feel like this, and I don't want my husband or my wife to be doing this, and I don't want my. Okay, let's pause. What is it you do want? And like you say, it's the visualization. And then when we can get into that space and we can use the
Mm.
words manifesting, or we can, whatever, but
Yes,
really,
creating. Yes.
exactly, being really intentional about, okay, my name is X. Inside, I feel I've got these values, capacities, and skills, gifts, and talents. I'd like to give those away to the world. That helps me inform my purpose. And in order to do that, I would like a job that does this, this, and this. That is not an easy process, but you are able to do that with clients. And I love the fact that you've just said, Cathryn, people often come away for a couple of days because we're
Yes.
seeing the noise ramp up, especially from technology and social media, where I think we probably will see in your lifetime almost a career coaching retreat type thing. They come away, it's create the life you actually want, not by eating vegan or going to yoga. That's another thing, but by
Yeah.
coming away and actually having that time to reflect, to go inside, to consolidate what's gone before, to be able to move forwards. And I often say to people, it's a bit like tidying up your house. You've got two options. You can either turn the lights down, you can't see the mess, or you can turn the lights up so you can see the mess and tidy up.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
in people's careers, they don't do that. They just think, well, I'll just turn the lights down. I'll try
Yes.
not to feel the pain so much. And next thing you know, you've tripped over the dog and broken your leg. These are not great ways to live. And
Yes.
you don't suggest people do that. Let's turn the lights on. Let's have a
Yes.
look at what we've got
Yeah.
and move forwards. Cathryn, I want to ask you, and this is a really clickbaity type word, but I really
Mhm.
want to ask you about legacy and fear of mortality.
Yeah.
As we get older, people
Yeah.
come into this space, they're working because they don't have their legacy piece or their sort of end point defined. What do you say when you get clients like that?
It is a very, very similar process. Again, it's about unpacking. So we'll have a look at the journey they've taken. We'll have a look at the experience they've gained. We'll have a look at the 5 stories. So it's an exercise I do. The 5 stories of things they've worked on, projects. So it could be personal or work related projects that they have absolutely loved doing. And when I take them outside of that space, it's not like going through a CV and tell me about that project that you managed. It's about things, and it may even be that project is one of the examples that they give. But tell me what those five stories would be, and then tell me the story. Tell me what you did, and when they start telling me those stories, they start to remember and start to feel connected to that part of themselves that is lost and buried. And I mean, I've got hundreds and hundreds of those clients' stories. They're all sort of circling through my head at the moment, saying, "Pick me, pick me." The one that I'll tell you about was just very quickly is a chap who he had recently completed his MBA, so late 40s, was quite stuck in the profession he was in, and needed to make a change and really use that MBA to best advantage, but felt very stuck. Some personal circumstances. And one of the stories that he told was when he was 7 years old and he was in the Cubs. And he said they had this nighttime orientation. They said they had compasses and they had a map and the treasure was buried somewhere. And he said, I looked at the group that I was assigned to, and he said we were all sort of nerdy, geeky, quiet. And he said we had no chance because boys in the other groups were, far more live wires. And he said, we went about it, we followed the map, we used our torch, we did all of it. And he said, we won. And he
Really?
said, the power of that, knowing that even as the quiet ones, we could take this logical step by step approach. And he said that has never left me. And then he went on to talk about other adventures. He and his new wife back then took time off to explore South America on the back of a motorbike for 12 months when they got married, and things like that that people forget, that have really meant something to them. Once we start unpacking those, I'm listening avidly for, what did you enjoy? What are you good at? What do you want more of? What do you want to move away from? So when we're looking at our legacy, what do we want to leave behind? What do we want to be known for, even in a small way? And yes, for some people it will be to have awards and accolades, or to get to the top of the tree, to be a fantastic leader. And it doesn't matter to the world what it is. What matters is what is inside you, and what would you like to hear people saying about you. I had an example of this recently, where I went to a networking event with my daughter, my eldest daughter, and she said, I don't do networking. I don't, and she's very personable. And I said, well, it's just chatting with people, really. And so we were at this event. I was talking to a chap, and she was standing next to me talking to somebody, but sort of in the earshot. I'm trying to listen to him, but I can just hear her saying, and my mum does this, and this is how she helps her clients. And this person became a client, this woman became a client. And I thought, and my daughter's Lindsay as well. I said, Lindsay, like, you're just natural at that. And she said, it's just so easy because of the work that you do and the stories you tell. I
Yeah.
know how much you help them. So how could I tell her anything else? So I think it's that, what do you want to be known for? What is the mark that you would like to make on the world? And it might be a book that you want to write. It might be I don't know, it could be a process, it could be some charity work, some volunteering work that you might like to do. But it's about, again, looking at what your offering can be to the world. And what I find is, when people are nearing retirement age, they aren't necessarily thinking about going in to do some voluntary work at a high enough level, an area where, because of the experience they have, they can really make an impact. And the example I would use there would be, yes, you can go and sort of ladle the soup at the soup kitchen, in a local city, but you could also be the coordinator of the program for that city, or a nationwide program coordinator for that, using the skills that you have, but having an impact at a much broader level. But it's really, it's about listening to what that little voice inside us is saying, and taking time, whether that's through meditation or through journaling or through talking it through with somebody who is going to just help you extract that and create something from it that is going to be something that you can really pour your energy and your time into, to make a difference, without, again, without overstretching yourself, without you burning out, without you losing yourself in the process, because that isn't necessary. And sometimes we feel so compelled to do it because we can't say no, or we can't say only this, that we can end up drowning in the next thing.
That reflective practice and that pause is essential. There's no way you can steer a car at 90 miles an hour. And I know you've got the gift of being able to get people to slow down,
Mm.
pause, reflect, and then speed up again. But I often see people, especially if we're using I use Clifton Strengths and 360 as well as part of my sophrology work, and I know that you use various tools as well.
Yes.
Can't use that on their own, because all that's doing is just giving you more. It's like having another map. You don't need
Yes.
another map. You need to take the maps away, work out where you actually are, and then you can go back to the map. But unless we know where we're going, we do need to know where we're starting from. And I think we forget
Mm.
that so quickly. And the way that you work allows people to unfold that really, really beautifully. Thank you for being brave enough to talk about legacy and retirement, because I'm seeing this, especially as we start moving towards our 50s, that people are just almost working even harder because there's a sense of panic. Oh my gosh, I haven't done what I thought I was going to do by the time I was 50, 55, 60. Therefore, I must keep going. And the question, of course, is, what is it you were planning to do? Is it just a financial incentive that you actually perhaps haven't gone through properly, and you perhaps don't need as much as you think you need,
Yeah.
or have you missed how it is you want to feel? And like you say, I often say to people, what is it you want to feel? Right now, let's look at your options. Um,
Yes.
and then they can make a really good decision from there. Um, Cathryn, tell me about your course online, because I know if people want to work with you, they've got a couple of new options. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So something that I found, and you and I have spoken about, is that yeah, my time is finite, and as much as I would, one of the songs I loved as a child was "I'd like to teach the world to sing," although I can't really sing myself in perfect harmony. It's like, I can't actually do this for the world one by one because
Yeah.
yeah, I'm mortal, as you know, as much as I might not want to want to acknowledge that. And what I realised was actually there is a power in group, doing things as a group where when we hear someone else's story, somebody who we sort of, we're comparing ourselves and we're admiring other people, and you hear their story and you go, oh, okay, right, that's me too.
Mm.
So there is a power of doing some of this work in a group where we're going, okay, how can we help each other? So I'm facilitating some group career coaching, but new this year is there's a do-it-yourself online course that people can do at their own pace.
Mm.
And what I find with that is because it's video led, I can help more people. And this is geared, whether these are people who are setting out in their career or in their 50s or 60s and looking for the next thing. These exercises with the videos will help them really dig deep into who they are and what they want. And there are three courses in the program. The first one is about finding out, what is your career potential. So it's very much around focused around career, but it brings all the aspects of who you are into that. The second module is how do you find that perfect job, that dream job? So we've worked out what it is, but how do you go about finding that? And I use some very creative and unconventional methods of doing that do get people to step a little bit outside their comfort zones, but it works. And they find jobs that they can absolutely flourish in. The third course in that program is succeeding in that role. So it starts off with your first 30, 60, 90 days. How do you land well? How do you both manage yourself and understand your role and responsibilities and start to make an impact within those early months? And it's doing it consciously. I love your program because it is about that consciousness. It's about not going in at 90 miles an hour and not being able to steer and feeling like suddenly you've got to take you end up taking your hands off the wheel because it's too scary. It's about really taking this considered and conscious approach to the work that you're doing, to who you want to be in that role, and making that difference within there. So those are the three elements of that, combining do it yourself, so some self work, some group coaching, and also one-to-one coaching where that's needed as well, because sometimes there's just this benefit of going, these are my unique circumstances, and I feel like I'm very different because of this and this. It's almost like being a unicorn, and it's like, okay, yeah, I get that. Here's my advice on how to approach the program. Join these group sessions, and people can fly through the program. I've had somebody who had just been made redundant who said, I have to start my new job in 6 weeks' time. And we found her the perfect job through going through these things. And I'd said to her, she was just so driven to do this. And it was, she had to pay the bills. And I said to her, I'll send you a proposal now that we've spoken. And she said, just give me your bank details. She said, I don't have time for a proposal. And we went through that program at rapid speed, got her CV to where she needed to be, helped prepare her for the interviews. And she started 5 weeks later. She started in her new role. And her testimonials I think it's on LinkedIn and on my website. And she said, I had no idea that finding a new job could be so much fun. So it's, so it wasn't about, the redundancy, the feeling down, the whatever. It was, this is fun.
Yeah.
And I try and I don't try and make it as much fun as possible. It is fun. It is so rewarding to be able to help people on this journey and just see them flourishing and knowing that they are then going to go on and make an impact in the world. And you know, you and I both work with leaders as well, and that is hugely rewarding, because when you're working with a leader who is leading from the heart, you know, it's this balance of head and heart, but certainly having, you know, relationships and people at the core. We know that the work we're doing, it's like the soup kitchen analogy, they are going to go on and lead people in maybe a very different way to how they would have done it without this particular approach.
Absolutely. And I think we're really seeing the dialogue around non-predatory leadership coming to the fore now, because it's those subconscious behaviors that make us poor leaders. When we actually understand where our true power is, we become great leaders, whether it's in the context of parenting, as you described, whether it's in the corporate space, whether we're in the
Yeah.
non-profit. When we really become authentic, visible, not vulnerable, fear-led and shame-filled leaders, everything changes. But we really have to pause and step into our true power to do that. Cathryn, the work that you do is remarkable. You and I could talk for ages about so many different things. I hope people have understood a little bit, especially if they dialed in to talk about imposter or listen to imposter syndrome. It really is about the way you talk to yourself. Would you talk to anybody else like that? No, then don't be, shaming yourself. But really going on the inside and thinking, okay, what is it that is those stories and experiences that I carry that have made me excited, positive, and passionate. Closing comments from you, Cathryn. Anything else you'd love listeners to get excited
Mm.
about or that you'd like to share today?
I think I would probably close on talking a little bit more about imposter syndrome, and just, you know, anybody listening to this who knows that they have been held back either by, you know, beliefs that have been instilled by them through society and through experiences, maybe setbacks that they've had, or beliefs that they have about themselves, that they aren't as good as, or as clever as, or as attractive as, or as talented as, all of those comparisons that we make, and thinking about the impact that that kind of thinking has on on promotions, on risk taking, on pursuing opportunities, on living your best life and being able to give more of yourself, from a place that doesn't break you, from a place that actually nourishes and sustains you. So, you know, imposter syndrome can actually drive more perfectionism and drive more overachievement. And I see a lot of this where, in fact, I imagine my sister's going to be watching this. We had a conversation this morning. She works for one of the big consultancies, and she's just talking there about, you know, they have this 5-level scale of measurement of achievement, and the middle. The middle one is exceeds expectations, and then there are 2 above that. And she said, but middle makes me sound like I'm in the middle, and that's not where I want to be, because I'm putting so much into this. It's actually demotivating. And she's an extremely high achiever, but there's a personal cost to that. There's a personal cost to that competitiveness, and the long-term effects of that on our mental health and on burnout does nobody any favors. And what I would encourage anybody to do is to stop and to realize that your life and your career is your responsibility. There is, you know, we can blame, you know, that we will all have had circumstances that have given us a really big knock, and nobody knows our truth. Nobody knows us. We are the authority on our lives and what matters to us. And if that is something that resonates and you want to know what to do with that, but, you know, how do I do that? Work with a coach. I mean, work with Lindsay, work with me, and then probably other coaches in your networks as well. But, you know, work with somebody who can help you tap into you and your own authority, because you have all the answers.
You absolutely do. You have everything you need. There are no problems to solve here, but we do have to go inside to find it. And I think we'll probably close on that note, because you and I both want to make our message our mission, and I think that's probably what we want to bring to the world. When we see
Yes,
that you have everything, just like that acorn, it's a beautiful,
that's
beautiful
me.
place to start, and also get the support that you need to be able to walk that journey. It's very hard when you're in it on your own. Um, to
It
be able
is,
to.
yeah. and I'll just add to that, I can't do it for myself. You can't do it for yourself. So we have people who are our sounding boards as well, because trying to, get your brain to look at your brain is a very difficult thing to do.
Impossible.
Yes,
Absolutely
it's impossible. So it is. It's about that, having a mirror, having somebody who's going to ask those questions and help reflect back what they see is an amazing experience.
So, people finding you, Cathryn, the website that you can guide people to is www dot.
Yes, so there's coachingbycathryn.com.
And if they do want to find you on
Right.
LinkedIn, you and I are both very,
Yes,
very active on LinkedIn as Lindsay Francis, and
Cathryn O'Donnelly.
fantastic. Cathryn, it was an
Yes.
absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to many more conversations.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And if anybody takes one little thing away from this, and that that can change their world, then I think this hour that we've spent together will be time really, really well spent. So thank you.